Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. After our spoken prayer and a time of silence, we will sing together Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, which is also printed in your order of service. We'll sing first in English and then in Spanish. Now I invite you into a period of quiet meditation. You can close your eyes if you wish and get comfortable in your seat. I invite you to think about the father figure that you carry in your heart. I invite you to remember the gifts and the wounds that you received from that person or persons. If any feelings come up, just breathe deeply and honor those feelings as a connection with your own heart. And as we close our meditation, I invite you to listen to some fathering words that we don't get to hear often enough.
I love you, just the way you are. I have confidence in you. You can achieve your goals. I will stand behind you. You can depend on me. I'm so proud of you. You can stand up for yourself. Your opinions and feelings are most important. I have faith in you. Hey, love you.
And when you are ready, I invite you to breathe deeply 3 times and open your eyes. Our reading this morning is from Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. A letter, 3 cheers for Father. Yes, a nice long letter. He is well and thinks he shall get through the cold season better than we feared. He sends all sorts of loving wishes for Christmas and a special message to you girls, said Mrs. March, patting her pocket as if she had got a treasure there. I think it was so splendid in Father to go as a chaplain when he was too old to be drafted and not strong enough for a soldier, said Meg warmly. When will he come home, Marmee? Asked Beth with a little quaver in her voice. Not for many months, dear, unless he is sick. He will stay and do his work faithfully as long as he can, and we won't ask for him back a minute sooner than he can be spared. Now come and hear the letter. They all drew to the fire, Mother in the big chair with Beth at her feet, Meg and Amy perched on either arm of the chair, and Joe leaning on the back, where no one would see any sign of emotion if the letter should happen to be touching. Very few letters were written in those hard times that were not touching, especially those which fathers sent home. In this one, little was said of the hardships endured, the dangers faced, or the homesickness conquered. It was a cheerful, hopeful letter, full of lively descriptions of camp life, marches, and military news. And only at the end did the writer's heart overflow with fatherly love and longing for the little girls at home. Give them all my dear love and a kiss. Tell them I think of them by day, pray for them by night, and find my best comfort in their affection at all times. A year seems very long to wait before I see them, but remind them that while we wait, we may all work, so that these hard days need not be wasted. I know they will remember all I said to them, that they will be loving children to you, will do their duty faithfully, fight their bosom enemies bravely, and conquer themselves so beautifully that when I come back to them, I may be fonder and prouder than ever of my little women. The other day, I fell victim to one of the enormous potholes on my dirt road in Wellfleet. I didn't realize how bad it was at first, although I did hear a particularly heart-sinking thud as my tire hit the hole in just the wrong way. It wasn't until I was driving through Truro, though, that my tire finally succumbed to its injury and went completely flat. I pulled over and slowly came to terms with the fact that though I had my AAA card in my wallet, my cell phone was snug in its charger at home. Don't panic, I thought. People used to handle situations like this without cell phones. I had just passed the package store less than a mile back, so I got out and I began my highway walk. I know, as a modern woman, I should really be more comfortable changing my own tire. But that day, I just wasn't feeling up to it. And I found myself wishing my dad was there. I'm almost 40 years old, but I still like to call my dad when things go wrong. Even if he really has no idea how to fix the situation, he always confidently comes up with a plan to right the world or change a tire. This is something that we want from fathers, for them to take care of us. I remember when I was little, a teenage girl who lived across the street and had just gotten her driver's license crashed her parents' car into our white picket fence. In a great early model of restorative justice, my father forgave her, mended the fence, and then made her paint it. I thought it was brilliant. She didn't, of course, but I doubt she ever forgot it. Hopefully, she became a safer driver after that. I thought my father was like Solomon, coming up with just the right wise thing to do in response to a tricky situation. It was like he stood before our small Plymouth neighborhood and said, "Cut the baby in half." And that's the second thing we want from our fathers, right? Someone to mete out justice. Someone to ensure that life is fair, that wrongs are punished and rights are rewarded. I wonder how many of you grew up under the threat of, "Just wait till your father gets home." Of course, this all breaks down when we think of all the imperfect fathers out there, those that ruled not with their intellect, but with their fists or belts, those that were absent, or too numbed or enraged by alcohol to think clearly about consequences. But overall, I think many of us still think of fathers as arbiters of justice. And though we all have different images of fathers from our own life stories, we also have some common father figures that we share from literature and movies and from the Bible. And they are formative too to our ideas about fatherhood. Our reading this morning was from one of my favorite books, Little Women. Louisa May Alcott paints a picture of a loving, engaged father whose advice both admonishes and inspires his daughters. Mr. March isn't a main character in the book because he is away at war as a chaplain, which seems to add to his character. In reality, Louisa May Alcott's father, Bronson Alcott, was very much at home. He was a transcendentalist philosopher and teacher. He inspired his daughter, but not always in positive ways. He was overbearing and often found fault with Louisa. He had a lot of crazy ideas, like moving his entire family to a communal utopian farm experiment called Fruitlands, which failed, mostly because the men involved were better philosophers than farmers. Some scholars think that Mr. March is more the father that Louisa May Alcott wished she had. Some of the common father figures that we share are ideals, and some are caricatures. I think of Archie Bunker from the show All in the Family. Archie is a veteran, a blue-collar worker, and a family man. He's also a bigot, a racist, a misogynist. He's an equal opportunity bigot, making fun at turns of blacks, Hispanics, commies, gays, hippies, Jews, Asians, Catholics, and women's libbers. He also doesn't like the English, Germans, Irish, or Polish. Archie is a Christian, but often misquotes the Bible. He takes pride in being religious, although he rarely attends church services and constantly mispronounces the name of his minister, Reverend Felcher. He calls him Reverend Fletcher, and when Edith inevitably corrects him, he dismisses the error with, "Whatever." In Archie Bunker, we see a father whose ideas are being eclipsed by the next generation. The ongoing tension between Archie and his liberal son-in-law Mike is fodder for laughter, but also for analysis of the social questions of the times. According to Edith, Archie's resentment of Mike stems primarily from the fact that Mike was attending college, while Archie had been forced to drop out of high school during the Great Depression to support his family. The show's creator, Norman Lear, originally intended that audiences would despise Archie Bunker. He thought that Bunker's opinions on race, sex, marriage, and religion were so wrong as to present a parody of right-wing bigotry. He was shocked when Archie quietly became a beloved figure to much of America. And newscasters today still refer to a subset of the American public as Archie Bunker voters. Still, as the series progressed, Archie did mellow somewhat. In one episode, when asked to speak at the funeral of his friend Stretch Cunningham, Archie, surprised to learn that his friend was Jewish, overcomes his initial discomfort and delivers a moving eulogy, closing with a heartfelt shalom. Perhaps in Archie Bunker, we see the parts of our fathers that we wish to leave behind, but also the possibility of their redemption. Another model of fatherhood comes to us in print and on the screen in Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch played by Gregory Peck in the film, is a lawyer and resident of the fictional Macomb County, Alabama. He's the father of Jem and Scout. Lee based the character on her own father, Amasa Coleman Lee, an Alabama lawyer who, like Atticus, represented black defendants in a highly publicized criminal trial. Atticus has become something of a folk hero in legal circles and is treated almost as if he were an actual person. President Barack Obama once referred to Atticus Finch as an ideal American character. In July 2015, just before Lee's highly anticipated second novel, Go Set a Watchman, was officially published, a New York Times review of the book, which is set about 20 years after the time period depicted in To Kill a Mockingbird, revealed that Atticus, now in his early 70s, is a far less progressive character. He even supports segregation. People were devastated. It was like they had learned a long-held shameful secret about their own father. We don't like when our fathers disappoint us, even the fictional ones. The most terrifying common fatherly example that comes to mind is Abraham in the Hebrew Bible, who God tests by asking him to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. In the book of Genesis, God says, "Take your son whom you love and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." So the next day, Abraham gets up early and saddles his donkey. He sets out with his son for the place God has told him about. When they see it in the distance and dismount, Isaac says, "Father, the fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answers, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." Then they hike to the place God told him about, and Abraham builds an altar there and arranges the wood on it. Then he binds his son Isaac and lays him on the altar on top of the wood. When he reaches out his hand and takes the knife to slay his son, the angel of the Lord calls out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy," he says. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." I feel like you can't hear this story without wondering in terror if your own father would have tied you to a post and arranged wood around you before finally being stopped by an equally terrifying angel of God. Which of course brings us to the most often cited father figure, God himself. I think the metaphor of God the Father has been such an important one to so many people because it is comforting to think of the world being controlled by a father figure who will take care of us, protect us, and who will ensure that the world is not random, but rather ruled by the wise counsel of someone who knows more than we do, who sees the bigger picture. Even if this father is sometimes violent and vengeful, it is easier to take our punishments than to believe that we live in a universe of chaos and chance. And do we? If we don't believe in an all-powerful and all-knowing God, is the only other option to flounder around in a world of chaos and chance? I never finished my story about the flat tire, did I? Maybe some of you are wondering. I think when I left off, I was despairing on the side of Route 6. Well, I made it to the liquor store and explained to the lady behind the counter that I needed to borrow her phone because I had a flat tire up the road. And she said, sure, I could use hers. But before I could decide who to call, the man behind me in line piped up and said in his musical Jamaican accent, "A flat tire, you say? I can fix that for you." Richard, my good Samaritan. He met me up the road with his van and had my tire off and my spare on in no time. "I can't thank you enough," I said to my new accidental father. "Not a problem," he said. "I think we should always try to help people when we can." God the Father has never been a concept that I could get on board with. I've tried to balance it with Mother God language, have enjoyed rituals that call upon the goddess, have visited Hindu temples where various gods are depicted with many arms or the trunk of an elephant, have both male and female identities. But in the end, for me, the concept of the holy and the divine just aren't compatible with anthropomorphizing in that way. Putting human characteristics on God just doesn't fit with how I see the holy universe. And yet, on the other hand, I believe that the spirit of love and care and justice that we seek from God is really only carried out in very human ways and through human hands, through Richard and those that stop to help a stranger, through those who are working to transform our current justice system into one that is more fair, through teachers and neighbors and social workers who help to parent children that aren't their own, through faith communities uniting and promising to, as our covenant says, help one another. So there you have it. Lots to think about on this Father's Day. Our own fathers or their absence, the fathers we are presented with in books and on TV, the metaphors we have been given by our various religious traditions, and the opportunity we each have to be good fathers to the world. But right now I am mostly thinking about pancakes. I can start smelling them wafting through the floorboards. So I think we should adjourn to our annual pancake breakfast, where I invite you to continue the conversation about fathers. But before we do that, let's sing together one last time my favorite lullaby, hymn number 409, "Sleep, My Child." Please rise as you are able.